every terrorist thug smuggling poisonous drugs into the United States of America, please be warned that we will blow you out of existence. That's what we're doing. We have no choice.
What if the most dangerous drug network in the United States never crossed a border in secret, but moved openly through official approvals, trusted signatures, and quiet silence?
A federal operation in Washington, D.C. revealed how a trusted government office had quietly enabled a nationwide drug trafficking network.
At 4:41 a.m., Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., while the city slept, a system built to protect the public was still running exactly as designed. No alarms, no warnings. Just paperwork moving faster than it ever should have. Within months, hundreds of decisions, each legal on its own, had cleared the way for a flow of narcotics that would reach deep into American communities. This story is not about street dealers or violent raids alone. It's about how authority, when left unquestioned, can become the most powerful weapon in organized crime. As you watch, ask yourself one question. If everything looked legitimate, who was supposed to stop it? If you want clear, step-by-step breakdowns of investigations like this, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. 4:41 a.m., Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C. The city was still asleep, sealed behind quiet streets and routine trust. Office lights glowed softly inside the complex that housed the Speaker of the House, a place designed to project order, stability, and control. At this hour, nothing suggested urgency. Nothing suggested danger. Inside that system stood Salama Faria Aden, 32 years old, one of the youngest House Speakers in American history, appointed, praised, and publicly uncompromising on crime. Her rise had taken less than 2 years, faster than most careers take to stabilize. To the public, it looked like reform working as intended. But long before dawn, another clock had been running. For nearly 11 months, federal analysts had tracked patterns that refused to behave like coincidence. Approval times that were too fast. Permits that bypassed secondary review. Emergency exemptions issued at rates nearly 5 times higher than historical norms. No alarms were triggered. Every action was justified. Every document looked clean. By the end of that period, more than 1,200 authorization records carried the same internal signature code. Each one unlocked movement. Each one removed friction. Each one moved money. No sirens echoed across Capitol Hill that morning. No doors were forced. The system was still intact, operating exactly as designed. What no one outside sealed files understood was this: the danger was not hidden in chaos. It was embedded in procedure. And by the time the city would wake up, that procedure was about to turn against itself. What investigators uncovered next was not a hidden cartel cell or a secret warehouse. It was something far quieter and far more dangerous. Inside sealed records, approvals moved at a speed that should not have existed. Routine permits cleared in hours instead of weeks. Inspection waivers appeared just before peak shipping windows. Temporary exemptions quietly became permanent practices. On paper, each decision was defensible. Together, they formed a pattern. Under Salama Faria Aden's authority, more than 1,400 legislative and administrative approvals were issued in less than a year. Nearly 1 in 4 bypassed secondary oversight entirely. Internal reviews that normally slowed logistics never triggered. No objections were filed. No audits followed. The system trusted the signature. Money responded immediately. Financial analysts later flagged capital flows that surged by over 280% within days of key approvals. Transfers arrived in clean monthly increments, routed through consulting firms, logistics advisors, and compliance services. None of them handled cargo. None of them handled drugs. They handled access. That was the design. No violence was required. No threats were issued. Every participant could claim distance, procedure, and professionalism. Authority removed friction. Friction removal created opportunity. And here's the question you should be asking right now. If everything looked legal, who was supposed to stop it? In the next chapter, you'll see what happens when that question is finally answered, at the exact moment the system least expected it. 5:29 a.m., Washington, D.C. The directive did not circulate. It did not invite discussion. It moved outward from a single federal command channel and terminated routine across 5 states in under 90 seconds. Phones vibrated once, then routes froze. Highway exits that had carried freight uninterrupted for months were sealed. Port schedules were suspended mid-cycle. Rail transfers halted where they stood. What had functioned as a seamless logistics corridor only minutes earlier collapsed into silence. The first movements were invisible to the public. Teams deployed in staggered waves, avoiding sirens, avoiding attention. By 5:41 a.m., more than 1,000 federal and joint units were in motion. Drones lifted quietly over industrial zones. K-9 units staged at secondary access points. Financial task forces began locking accounts in parallel. Then the structure fractured. At bonded warehouses labeled as medical storage, agents found industrial packaging equipment calibrated for high-volume throughput. Cutting agents stacked beside vacuum sealers. Manifests aligned to interstate corridors already optimized by policy adjustments months earlier. Within the first 20 minutes, over 360 kilograms of narcotics were secured, without a single shipment leaving the ground. Resistance appeared briefly and collapsed just as quickly. 2 armed coordinators attempted to flee through loading bays. Both were intercepted before reaching open streets. No prolonged standoffs followed. The system had never prepared for friction. By 6:02 a.m., attention shifted inward. The office of the House Speaker was isolated. Access credentials were revoked in real time. Digital authorizations that once cleared movement instantly now returned error codes. When Salama Faria Aden was escorted from the secured corridor, there were no statements and no denial. Investigators did not need confessions. They had timestamps, approval chains, and synchronized transfers. Behind that authority sat the numbers. Encrypted ledgers mapped over $240 million in routed capital moving through layered shell entities. Every surge aligned with a policy adjustment. Every adjustment aligned with cargo movement windows. The sequence repeated with mechanical precision. This was not exposure by chance. It was a switch being thrown. By dawn, 23 locations had been secured. Routes designed to move an estimated 3.4 tons by late winter no longer existed. What remained was evidence stacked in sealed rooms and a realization settling across federal command centers. The operation had not removed an infiltrator. It had shut down a machine that had been operating openly, until it was forced to stop. What followed the raids was not relief. It was dissection. As evidence moved from warehouses into secured analysis rooms, investigators stopped looking at locations and began tracing flow. Data replaced geography. Timelines replaced maps. What emerged was not a hierarchy of criminals, but a process engineered for continuity. More than 3,500 approval records were reconstructed line by line. Each one appeared ordinary in isolation. Together, they formed a relay. A permit triggered a clearance. A clearance unlocked a routing change. A routing change aligned with staffing adjustments. Every step reduced friction by design. Financial analysis deepened the picture. At least 21 shell entities cycled in and out of existence, some lasting less than 12 weeks. None employed more than 2 listed officers. None maintained physical offices. Yet combined, they processed over $680 million in structured transfers. Payments arrived predictably, often within 48 hours of policy adjustments. Amounts stayed just below mandatory reporting thresholds. Descriptions referenced consulting, compliance optimization, or emergency coordination. Nothing illegal in language. Everything illegal in purpose. No single official controlled the network. That was the strength. Port supervisors approved movement without inspection. Customs officers issued remote clearance codes. Licensing departments certified facilities that never treated a single patient. Law enforcement schedules quietly shifted away from critical windows. Each participant handled paperwork. No one handled contraband. At the center sat authority. Documents seized from the Speaker's office showed that once an authorization carried her internal tag, secondary verification was automatically bypassed. Systems treated those approvals as final. Oversight was not defeated. It was never invited. What made the structure resilient was its normality. Meetings were brief, communications were technical. No one discussed substances. They discussed capacity, congestion, and timing. The language of administration masked the consequences. By the time analysts completed the reconstruction, the scope was unavoidable. This was not corruption hiding within government operations. It was government procedure repurposed as infrastructure. And as the machine was finally exposed, one truth became clear. The most efficient systems do not fail loudly. They fail only when someone forces them to stop. The impact did not appear first in courtrooms or briefing rooms. It surfaced quietly, far from ports and policy offices, in places that never signed a single approval. Emergency departments across 12 states began reporting the same anomaly. Admissions surged along specific interstate corridors within days of the shipments that had already moved before the shutdown. In some regions, overdose-related calls rose by 31% in less than 6 weeks. In others, the increase pushed past 45%. Overwhelming night shifts that were staffed for routine volume, not crisis. Hospitals adapted in silence. Hallways filled before sunrise. Supply inventories ran thin. Medical staff rotated longer hours, not because of a declared emergency, but because the pattern refused to announce itself. Ambulances queued outside facilities designed for half the load. No alarms connected these scenes back to Capitol Hill, but the timing aligned with mathematical precision. The strain moved outward. Social services reported sudden spikes in family displacement. School counselors flagged attendance drops clustered around the same transport routes investigators had already dismantled. In several counties, foster placement requests increased by 22% within a single quarter. Clinics that had received certifications on paper never opened their doors. Funds allocated for treatment vanished into accounts that no longer existed. Communities absorbed the fallout without context. In working-class neighborhoods, the damage arrived visibly. Sirens, closures, quiet vigils. In wealthier districts, it arrived behind closed doors. Private care, silent withdrawals, unreported numbers. The disparity masked the scale, allowing the crisis to fragment instead of concentrate. What made the damage harder to confront was its distance from the cause. The people affected never met a legislator. They never saw a permit. They never knew which signature removed the barriers that let harm move freely. By the time analysts estimated the reach, the numbers had lost meaning. Hundreds of thousands of doses had already entered circulation. The system that enabled it had been dismantled, but its consequences were still unfolding. And unlike money or documents, those consequences could not be seized, frozen, or rolled back. After the warrants were executed and the routes collapsed, there was no moment of release, no celebration. What followed was quieter, heavier, and more unsettling. The office remained intact, furniture aligned, flags in place, the nameplate still mounted outside the door. To an outsider, nothing appeared broken. But inside federal holding rooms, the structure that had once operated effortlessly was reduced to timestamps, balances, and authorization codes. Salama Faria Aden did not contest the documents. She did not dispute the figures. By then, the system she had relied on was no longer abstract. It had dates, amounts, sequences. Investigators traced more than 2,900 linked approvals across agencies that never questioned their origin. Each decision, small on its own, had compounded into something vast. As indictments expanded, institutions responded with familiar language. Statements emphasized individual failure. Committees announced internal reviews. Oversight bodies promised reform. None of it explained how the system had functioned uninterrupted for nearly a year. That question lingered outside official rooms. Communities began asking why speed had replaced scrutiny, why exceptions had become routine, why trust had been extended without resistance. Analysts concluded that no single failure caused the collapse. It was accumulation. Silence repeated, authority accepted, responsibility diluted. By the time the full scope was acknowledged, analysts estimated that earlier intervention could have reduced distribution volume by over 60%. The delay had not been neutral. It had carried a measurable cost. What this case ultimately exposed was not a flaw in law or enforcement. It revealed a vulnerability in assumption, the belief that professionalism equals integrity. That procedure guarantees protection. That authority polices itself. The system did not fail because it was weak. It failed because it was trusted without question. And once that trust was broken, no operation, no matter how large, could undo the damage already set in motion.